This one's a classic.
Howdy everybody, it's me, Togain. Almost immediately after finishing my grind to 100 million mesos in Artale after the announcement of 4th job, Deep Aqua Road was released, and so my grind to 4th job began. I had given myself a deadline to grind out the last 16 levels I needed. The timeline I initially set up for myself meant that ideally I would farm roughly half a level every single day, but I wasn't entirely sure I was up to that challenge. You see, after finishing my last grind, I gave myself a moment to breathe, to let the silence settle in just a bit. But before long, the next step was already waiting for me. I was starting to form an idea of what I wanted to achieve in this season of Artale, so I stepped up and made it happen. Nobody was going to do it for me after all. As a quick check-in for where we're at after the 100 million meso grind, I'm rocking a 107 attack Fair Frozen as my main DPS weapon, and a weak Eclipse that I honestly no longer have much use for these days. Polearm use for Dragon Knights is actually very content dependent. After the release of Deep Aqua, I reset my skills to a pure spear build, full Spear Crusher and full Dragon Fury Spear. The reasoning for this is that I had planned to grind strictly within Deep Aqua Road from here on out until at least the release of Leafree, and Gobies are much easier to kill when I'm able to attack all of them at once without having to switch weapons first. By the time we reach 4th job anyway, Dragon Fury will become mostly obsolete, being relegated to an aggro grabbing tool or finishing move at best. My gear is entirely the same as it's been for months, and I'm sitting at just over 100 million mesos in my meso stack. As my old guild had mostly withered away and died in the Artale off-season, I found myself a new one, a group I was hoping would take me all the way to Zachem, a boss that I was, more and more in my mind, setting up to be the ultimate goal I was aiming for this season. It's funny how these goals creep up on you. You think you're just farming, leveling up, passing time, but the next milestone starts forming quietly in the background whether you're aware of it or not. Now, some of you may or may not be wondering why I purchased such a weak Fair Frozen. Well, there are a few reasons for this. Lack of funding, keeping all of my gear within a similar quality level, the knowledge that future weapons are going to be released in the not-too-distant future, and that I should probably not blow all of my mesos on a transient weapon such as a Fair Frozen. A similar thought process I had with the Omega Spear, actually. Regardless, most of my wealth is reserved for mounts at the moment, so I didn't actually have all that much to work with quite yet. Still, I wasn't in a rush. I had what I needed to keep moving forwards, and that's all that matters. As far as long-term weapons go, I'm looking more towards a Panaka or Dragon Faltazan for Zachem clearing if I can afford it. They're going to be very expensive weapons, but it's an investment I would be far more willing to make. Maybe I'll even look to just purchase a better Fair Frozen when the higher-funded Dark Knights dump theirs into the auction house in favor of Dragon Faltazans. For those of you who may be wondering, Sky Skis won't be necessary in Artale, and I don't plan to acquire them. Dark Knights have faster attack speed with Beholder, which is an Artale exclusive balance change, so from what I understand, the Sky Skis' faster weapon attack speed is simply unnecessary. We will also be getting reverse weapons eventually as well, but probably not until Temple of Time, so it'll be a while before I worry about that. We can talk about gear all day, but there's only one goal in this video that we need to focus on: reaching level 110 and getting ready to head off to Leafree for the final grind to 4th job. So two goals, actually. Deep Aqua has this strange kind of peace to it. Even with monsters everywhere, it always feels a little quiet, like the game wants you to slow down. Almost immediately upon grinding here, I noticed that Artale did away with the unique skills that gobies possess in vanilla. You see, in vanilla old-school MapleStory, the bombing fish house would temporarily become immune to physical damage after being attacked. This mechanic changes the dynamics of farming gobies pretty significantly, since you would normally have to work around their immunity phase. Not in Artale, but if this mechanic didn't make its way into Artale, I just had to know whether sharks were changed as well. Their main mechanic was that they would remove players' buffs after being attacked, which is marginally more impactful than just going invincible for 10 seconds. This made sharks almost useless for farming in vanilla, because there was no good way to get around their debuffing mechanic. Some classes did have the tools necessary to do so, such as fire poison mages using poison mist or archers using puppet, but generally they were best avoided overall. In Artale, this is not the case. For the most part, these sharks function like regular enemies, and they give the highest EXP in all of Deep Aqua Road in a party scenario. So, that's where most people went. The map was large enough that a few players could easily party up and split it, and I found myself farming here quite often, usually when I was unable to find a gobies map to solo. The mesos I farmed in the last episode came in handy here for sure, as sharks specifically drained my mesos pretty quickly. Gobies were far more forgiving. I was able to break even there pretty easily, but little to no profit was really being made. I will say though that the party grinding element of sharks was really nice. Being in a group and chatting with people made the time fly by, and since I wasn't streaming this grind, it could get boring pretty fast. There's something peaceful in that repetition though, and I think MapleStory hits that mark perfectly. When the goal is clear and the pace is steady, it was casual, low pressure, just me, my party, and the deep ocean. But don't be scared of the part where there's sharks here as well, though, because that's not a part of it. Throughout all of MapleStory's history, sharks have never been a meta party grinding spot, so there's actually no historical data available for doing so, which made splitting this map difficult, since this is probably the first time in history that anyone's ever done this. People were confused on how to actually share the monsters, so we mostly had to just go by feel. We tried vertical splits, horizontal splits, sharing platforms. If it was possible within this 2D mushroom game, we tried it. Eventually though, the community mostly settled on giving everyone a platform of their own, and this setup was fairly effective even up to 6 players. Now let's talk numbers a bit. My primary training area in Deep Aqua Road, the Sharks, is a drain on my bank account, but that's why we farmed that 100 mil in the last episode. In fact, even if I only get a few item drops per hour here, I maybe won't lose any money at all training here. And therein lies the beauty of this region. It's really good EXP and costs almost nothing to farm. Hime's might be superior in terms of EXP, but man, they're even more tough on the wallet. On the bright side, since we learned that Yeti and Pepes are such good money makers for us, I can always go back there and farm up whatever I lose, which is something I definitely planned to do in the future. Gobies, on the other hand, were straightforward. Soloing yielded me about 3 million EXP per hour, which is a super nice round number. I never really tested party grinding in groups larger than 2 though, but when I did so, it dropped the EXP rate down to 2.5 mil without HS. Not that it mattered. I preferred to solo gobies anyway. Deep Sea Gorge 2 is actually one of, if not my #1 favorite map in MapleStory. I feel at home here, and I don't want to have any roommates in my Gobi Palace. The rates never really got any higher than this for Deep Aqua Road, and I was averaging about 3 to 5 hours per level throughout the 100s. Any time spent grinding and gaining EXP was time spent inching ever closer to 4th job, and I had plenty of options available between these two maps, so it was time to get to the grind. The goal? Level 110 before Leafree's release. I've leveled a huge number of characters through the 100s over the years, and I have found that levels 100 to 110 are some of the most painful levels to get through. You're kind of strong, but the EXP requirements are huge, and these requirements only grow as you continue to level. What's worse is that even when you reach level 110, you then still have 10 more levels to acquire before you can unlock 4th job. It's rough. It's demotivating. We're starting out at about 224 million total EXP acquired, and level 120 requires us to have a total of 536 million EXP. We're not even halfway there technically. And at about 3 million EXP per hour, we were looking at a grind that would take over 100 hours at this rate. Luckily, it wouldn't actually take quite this long after Leafree's release, with spots that give even higher EXP rates, but these Aqua Road numbers weren't exactly motivating. Level 110, however, only required 312 million EXP. That was a number I could live with, a goal that didn't feel overwhelming, just something to chip away at slowly. Man, it would be cool if old school MapleStory had a total EXP counter in-game. Did you know that it takes over 38 billion total EXP to reach level 200? Finding a Gobi's map could at times be difficult before Leafree's release, since sharks were effectively party content, only being soloed by the highest level players, as well as fire poison mages and outlaws. Gobies were mostly reserved for solo play, and people definitely took advantage of that. Gobies were always my first choice though, since they provided nearly the best EXP and actually allowed me to break even in terms of potion costs without having to rely on drops. I wasn't ready to go back to the Yeti and Pepe fields just yet. Sometimes though, when looking for a map, I would get lucky. Someone would simply relinquish their map to me in exchange for nothing. At level 108, 2 levels away from my pre-Leafree goal, I decided it was time to give Papulatus a shot. It was pretty fun. Essentially, I'm here to provide hyper body to help keep people alive, as well as using sacrifice to kill the bombs that Papulatus spawns every so often. Sacrifice is one of the few skills in the game that can break through their defenses, so this became part of my job. Of course, this meant I had to reset my skills once again, setting me back a clean 15 million mesos. Papulatus has a damage reflect period, but it's telegraphed sufficiently far out ahead enough that I never actually fell victim to this mechanic. This is in contrast to vanilla old school MapleStory actually, where there were often issues with damage reflect activating on a boss before it even played any sort of animation. Players had to keep track of the internal cooldown of damage reflect in order to avoid this instant death mechanic. A thing of the past, hopefully. So I did my first 7 runs with this group and ended up getting nothing of value. It was enjoyable though. Enjoyable enough that it gave me a lot of confidence moving forward that future bosses would be engaging and challenging without compromising enjoyment, which is exactly the modernization that old school MapleStory needs. So let's circle back to party grinding a little bit, because I had another thought about it. In Artale, there exist these snowflake cash shop items that give plus 20 weapon attack to everyone on the map for 10 minutes. They cost about 20 cents a piece if you were to purchase them through world coins, and roughly 400 to 500k a piece if you purchase them with mesos. In party training, it's expected that every member of the party rotates snowflakes for 100% uptime. This is of course excluding priests and bishops since they contribute holy symbol, I guess. It seems most players simply accept this fact as part of the party grind, but it always stings a little bit when I hear someone say they have to go purchase snowflakes, because I know that they're not exactly excited to do so. Very few people publicly complain about this, and the reality is that societal expectations will emerge in any context wherein people have to work together, and this snowflake meta is just one of those emergences. I figured I would mention it, since it is a factor to be considered when calculating meso income per hour when party training. I swapped between party grinding at Sharks and solo grinding at Gobies for about a week. There was very little of note that occurred during this grind, until one of the very last days at Aqua Road. I got a Sharp Eyes 20 Mastery Book drop, the most valuable drop from Sharks, all because I spoke out and stated that I wanted to be on the log rather than the very bottom of the map, taking it from the marksman in my party. Unfortunately, it's not really possible to know how much I'll get for this extremely valuable skill book that doesn't drop from any other non-boss monster in the game. You see, with Sharks being the endgame training spot at the moment and no 4th job release yet, there's an overly abundant supply of Sharp Eyes 20 books, so they're continually flooding the market, dropping in price without any of them being taken out of the economy. And I thought about what I would do with this mastery book. I have no use for it since I'm not an archer and I have no plans to make one, so it's definitely going to be sold. However, I knew better than to sell it immediately for the absolutely tiniest amount of mesos I would ever get for it. Once Sharks stop being meta and players move on to Leafree, as well as when 4th job archers begin failing the book, Sharp Eyes 20 should skyrocket in value again. This is just an educated guess though. The one factor that could influence this beyond what I'm anticipating to happen is the fact that Sharks are so easily accessible and farmable now without their debuffing mechanic that 4th job archers can just go farm there for a couple days until they get a book. Either way, I was confident I could get a bit more than 1 mil for this book in the future, so I decided I would hold on to it and just see what happens. And that's when I found a second Sharp Eyes 20 Mastery book. I was now one step closer to the goal. Level 110 was good enough to take me to Leafry in a party grinding scenario, so I pumped the brakes and took it easy until its release nearly a week later. After all of that grinding, a few quiet days felt well earned. I had burned through nearly 30 million of my mesos on this grind, and I had to make that back, so I headed back to Yeti and Pepe's for a small amount of grinding here and there while I waited for the next piece of content. I didn't really think I'd be making a video dedicated entirely to the Aqua Road grind, yet here we are. This is an interesting look into what is maybe a small moment in Artale's history, a small moment in old school MapleStory's history. It's certainly possible that Sharks will continue to be a meta training spot, but we all know Leafry clears Aqua Road in terms of EXP and drops, so I would be surprised if Sharks had all that much staying power in a post-Leafry old school MapleStory. For all we know, these short few weeks of Shark party training might be all we ever see of it. A more vanilla server would likely retain their debuffing mechanic, rendering them useless once again, and from what I can tell, there's no vanilla server even on the horizon at the moment. That's Artale for you though, crafting new and bizarre experiences. It took a lot more time than I anticipated to reach level 110, and I'm hoping the grind to 120 isn't too rough with Leafry's release. We're getting closer though. Closer to the ultimate goal of this season of Artale. Zachem will fall.